Amen. Good morning again, everyone. It's great to see you here today at Lakeshore. We want to welcome all of you. If you did not get a bulletin when you came in, if you would just raise your hand now as the ushers pass by. In that bulletin, there's announcements of activities that are coming up. There's also a sermon outline there to take notes on. Hope you'll get that out, get something to write with, and be ready to take notes as we go through the message time today. Just raise your hand if you need to get one of those. At this time, we want to recognize another family that's been blessed with a new addition. If Daniel and Alice Newman would come on up at this time. As they're coming, I will remind you of a couple of things. I want to thank everybody that helped out with the blood drive this past Monday. We were the host for the blood drive for our community, and I've got to tell you, Lakeshore turned out big time. In fact, we had so many people come, some didn't make appointments, and they actually had to turn people away. Have you ever heard of that at a blood drive? Isn't that amazing? Yeah. They just couldn't work them all in. So thank you so much for that response. Also, we want to thank everybody that helped out. Yes, this weekend we had a great event through our Game On Ministries that Lucas Reed heads up. It was at Ezel Harding Christian School. We appreciate them hosting that. And Lakeshore was well represented with volunteers, people serving all over the place throughout that program. And the gospel, the seeds of the gospel were planted in the hearts and the minds of those young men there. So let's thank everybody that helped out with that Game On outreach there. Ladies, don't forget there's a pool party coming up Tuesday night over at our house. So I'll be getting out of there. But you ladies, welcome to come on over and enjoy the pool party. That'll be great. Also, coming up in August, I have another Lakeshore one-on-one class, August the 8th through the 29th. That's Wednesday nights for 4 weeks. I hope you'll sign up for that online. Also, go to our website, lakeshorechristian.com. You can sign up for things there. You can get information there. You can go to our Facebook page and like us there and get updates there. We want you to stay informed. Daniel and Alice, come on up here. They were already blessed with one boy, Stan, and now they've been blessed with another boy, Hank. And they want to come today to dedicate Hank to the Lord and themselves to the Lord in raising their children. I want to present to you a Bible with Hank's name on it as a gift from the church as we remember and celebrate this day. Let's pray together. Father, we thank you for this family, for the love they have for you, the love they have for each other. And I know that in the heart of these parents, they want their children to grow up to know Jesus, to follow after him, to honor him with their lives. And Father, I know every child born is in your plan and your purpose, and you've got a will for that life. Something to be accomplished, good things to be done, blessings to be received. We dedicate this child to you so that he would be able to walk in the way you want him to walk and receive the blessings and have the impact that you want him to have with his life. We ask it all in Jesus' name. Amen. God bless you. Let's welcome Hank. Thank you. We are in a series of messages called Extreme Faith, and we've been looking at different Bible characters and looking at different examples of how God used them. Even though they weren't perfect, even though they often had failures in their lives, God used them to accomplish some great things because they were willing to at least try to step out with the faith that they have. It wasn't perfect, it wasn't complete, but even with a mustard seed size faith, if you step out and try, God can bless that and honor that and do some really good things with it. And we're going to continue that today by looking at another character. Before I get to him, though, all of us know of some examples of what we're going to be talking about today. Today, the title of the message is I Work Out. And basically what I meant by that is there's some people that you just know, maybe they're physically outstanding or they have some other giftedness or ability that really makes them stand out. So, you know, when people work out, sometimes they want to make sure people notice them. So they wear certain clothing styles or something like that to make sure you can tell they work out, right? And so there are people that stand out because of giftedness that they have or some accomplishment in their lives. But there are also those people who are very gifted, who seem to have everything going for them, who fall far short of their potential. You know people like that. Some of it's played out in the public arena. People like Tiger Woods, Michael Vick, football player named Ricky Williams. He decided he'd rather sit home and smoke pot for a few years than go to his training camp and work out with his team. Missed a few years of what he could have been doing to contribute to the team. Josh Hamilton, he's playing baseball today, one of the best baseball players out there today. He missed 3 years of baseball because he got into drugs and alcohol, and it took control of his life. Think what he could have done had he not given those years away. People in the entertainment arena we know publicly have played this out. People like Elvis Presley, people like Michael Jackson, Amy Winehouse, Whitney Houston, all very gifted, talented people who got off track with some things in their lives, and it caused destruction to come and death at a very early age. You see, potential doesn't mean it's going to really be lived out, that it's going to be accomplished, that all the good that should come from it is really going to come from it. The Scripture says we're all gifted by God when we come to follow Jesus Christ. He gifts us for service. That doesn't mean it's going to be fulfilled. It's going to be lived out the way it should be. Potential is only potential. It actually has to be lived out daily to accomplish the good that God wants it to accomplish. In Hebrews 11, we've been looking at a roll call there of great people of faith that accomplished some great things. Let's pick up there again. In Hebrews 11, beginning with verse 32, it says, "And what more shall I say? I don't have time to tell about Gideon and Barak and Samson and Jephthah, about David and Samuel and the prophets, who through faith conquered kingdoms." Listen to this list of what they did. Conquered kingdoms, administered justice, gained what was promised, shut the mouths of lions, quenched the fury of the flames, escaped the edge of the sword, whose weakness was turned to strength, who became powerful in battle and routed foreign armies. Whew. Man, that's some big time stuff, wasn't it? I mean, you talk about a list of, if you had a resume with that on it, wouldn't that look good? And I want to pick out one of those names that I just read there, Samson. Some people have described Samson as a he-man with a she problem. I think that pretty well describes Samson. You talk about a gifted man, Samson was gifted by God in a very unique and influential and powerful way. Today we're going to look at Samson and his life and his giftedness and see how his faith was sometimes where it needed to be and sometimes not. How sometimes he would rise to the occasion and sometimes he would fall flat. And yet here he is listed in this roll call of people of faith who accomplished some great things. I want to begin, number one on your outline is this. Samson was indeed a privileged man in a lot of ways. He was a privileged man. If you've got your Bible, you can open up to the book of Judges. So in the book of Judges, you read about Samson's life and events that took place there. Samson was born at a very opportune time. Let's look at Judges chapter 13 and verse 1. It says, "Again, the Israelites did evil in the eyes of the Lord, so the Lord delivered them into the hands of the Philistines for 40 years. Now, that doesn't sound like an opportune time, does it? I mean, Samson was one of the Israelites, and his people had done such evil things that God had allowed their arch enemies, the Philistines, to take them by force. And they were now enslaved by the Philistines, ruled by the Philistines. The people they hated among all the people of the world. This was their greatest enemy. And God allowed their greatest enemy to take them by force because of their evil. And you might think, well, why would that be a privileged time to be born? And I can tell you why. The people needed a hero. They needed a leader. And they hated living under the rule of the Philistines. They were looking and longing for that one that God would raise up to lead them out of that life that they were now having to live for 40 years. They wanted nothing more in their hearts and in their minds, and there was nothing that drove them more than wanting to get freed from the bondage that they were in. And they were looking for someone that God would use to be that leader. And here comes Samson, born at a time when they needed a great, strong, and powerful leader, and God blessed them with a man who would be given strength far beyond what any other man had ever had. What an opportunity to be born at a time like that and be gifted in that way. Oh, there was an evil time. It was a time when there was a lot of bad stuff going on. You might not think of that as an opportune time, just like today in the United States. I know things in a lot of ways aren't what they ought to be here in this country. And a lot of us are frustrated, and there's a lot of anger and resentment because things aren't the way we would like them to be, especially for us as Christians. The government, the country seems to be turning more and more away from God and the things of God and the teachings of God, and corporations and businesses and people out there in the communities are turning more away from God all the time. And we're thinking, what a terrible time this is. It's awful. People aren't honoring marriage, and immorality is being promoted as good, and all of that stuff's going on. And we're thinking, what a terrible time to be living here. And God is saying, wake up and look at the opportunity that we have as a church. We have what the world needs now more than ever. You see, when it's the darkest is when you need the light the most. and we have the light. We can be the people God has born at this time, in this place, for the very purpose of being light in this darkness. If we seize the opportunity, if we understand that this is a great time to rise up as the church. And when I say the church, you know I'm talking about you. I'm talking about me. We are the church. It's not the building. It's not an institution. It's the people. It's a great time for the church to rise up and be the powerful influence in this time that God wants us to be. The question is, what will we do with the giftedness that God's given us? You say, well, I'm not very gifted. Oh, friends, think about this for a minute. You live in the most blessed nation in the world. You have more material resources today than any generation that's ever lived. And think about the advances that have happened in our lifetime that would make it even more possible for us to do a greater job of spreading the gospel. Think about travel advancements now. You could hop on a plane today and be on the other side of the world in one day. You have the ability, and a lot of people in parts of the world don't have this. Most of you actually have a car, don't you? Some of you have more than one car. It may not be new, it may not be the nicest thing, but it got you here today, didn't it? When I go preach in the Dominican Republic, guess what? Most of the people walk to church that day to hear the gospel. You got to get in your car and drive here. Some of you had air conditioning on the way. Woo! That's a good thing, the last few 100-degree days, right? We are so blessed. And think of the technology we have today. We will post this message on our website. And people anywhere in the world that have any kind of internet access can hear me preaching today this message. That's scary good. I get some emails you wouldn't believe. I tend to offend people occasionally. I don't mean to. Well, sometimes I mean to, but usually I don't. And sometimes I hear about it from people I don't even know. But there's a good part of that. We can, with our technology today, in so many different ways, get the Word of God out there. We can take it all over the world instantly with the technology we have. Look at the advantages we have today for the spreading of the gospel that generations before us knew nothing about. What an opportune time to be living as a Christian, to be part of the church. With the resources we've got today, we ought to be turning the world upside down for Christ. We have that opportunity right before us right now. Samson was born at an opportune time. He was also privileged because he was raised by godly parents. It says in verses 2 through 4 of Judges 13, a certain man of Zorah named Manoah from the clan of the Danites had a wife who was childless, unable to give birth. The angel of the Lord appeared to her and said, you are barren and childless, but you're going to become pregnant and give birth to a son. Now see to it that you drink no wine or other fermented drink, and that you do not eat anything unclean. So they're given instructions, and her husband believes what the angel has said. And he asks and prays for the angel to come back and say, well, if this is going to be such a special child, please make sure you come give us more instructions about how to raise this child. They wanted to raise this child to honor God, to be used by God. They understood what a special blessing this child was going to be, and these parents loved God, and they wanted their children to know and love God and follow God, and if this was the son God was going to bless them with, they wanted this son to be raised the right way. And they were given instructions to raise him as a Nazirite. Now, that would be a difficult job in that culture. We find in the Scripture, it tells us a few things that were required of the Nazirite vow. One of those things was that you were not to cut his hair. That was part of being a Nazirite, taking that vow to be a Nazirite. You might think today that a lot of kids would love that, right? I got a grandson that wants to have that Justin Bieber look, you know, flipping that hair. So cool. You know, the girls love it, right? But in that culture, for a boy to have long hair was a disgrace. They didn't want their boys to have long hair. And yet, because of his Nazirite vow, guess what he's going to have? Never cut his hair. So every time he's around the other kids, what are they going to be doing? Ridiculing him, making fun of him because of his hair. He was also not supposed to touch any dead bodies. That doesn't sound like a big thing, except that later on he disobeys that and it causes a lot of problems. But it was because of a ceremonial cleansing. You were unclean if you touched a dead body, and you would have to go through the ceremonial cleansing to be cleansed again. And you know what a little boy's like a lot of times. There's a dead snake on the road. What's he going to do? He's going to pick it up. Go take it and show it to everybody. Other kids are picking it up, Mom. Why can't I pick it up, So you got to deal with that his whole life growing up. Not only that, but he could not work on some of the jobs that other kids could work at because sometimes they had to slaughter their animals for their food and everything. He could not touch the dead animals. So it took him out of that part of what other people were doing too. And he couldn't drink any wine at all. You have to remember, in that culture, wine was very much a part of their culture. They drank it with their meals all the time. They didn't have access to pure water all the time that they could have at every meal and things like that. And sometimes wine was the most a sanitary thing they could drink at the time, because if it's been fermented, and it's going to help protect them sometimes even from some problems they might have. That's why Paul told Timothy one time, drink a little wine for the sake of your stomach. It had, in moderation, it could be used in a medicinal kind of way. And he couldn't drink any wine. And he gets into teenage years and he gets into that young adult stage, and all the other guys are out drinking with their friends, right? Why can't I? Everybody else is doing it. And they had to be the kind of parents that would raise him the way God wanted him to be raised. And that's a huge challenge for parents today, isn't it, to raise your children the way God wants you to raise your children. No harder job in the world than being a parent, raising a child the way God wants you to raise that child. And this is one of those examples where the parents did it the way God said to do it. Now, we don't have every detail. We don't know that they were perfect with it all the time, but we have enough information to know they were serious about this, and they did the best they could to raise Samson the way God wanted him to be raised. He was privileged because he had parents like that. He was also privileged because, as I said earlier, he was given special strength like no other man. In Judges 13, beginning with verse 24, it says, the woman gave birth to a boy and named him Samson. He grew, and the Lord blessed him, and the Spirit of the Lord began to stir him while he was in Mahanaim between Zorah and Eshtaol. I didn't pronounce any of that right, but you don't know the difference. So. If you say it fast, nobody knows. Very early in his life, God was stirring in Samson. We're talking about God, the God of the universe, the God that created everything, the God of all power, all authority. God is stirring in this child. There's a power there that no other man in the flesh had had, that Samson's beginning to have, even at an early age. He was a phenom. He was stronger than anybody else, and he was able to display great feats of strength all through his life, over and over again. How many of you have heard of Samsonite luggage? You know why it was called Samsonite? Because of Samson. They advertised it when they first put it on the market as strong and durable and dependable. They had it in commercials. Do you remember the commercials? They had a gorilla throwing the suitcases around and stomping on it and jumping up and down on it, and it didn't hurt the suitcase. You probably would have hurt the suitcase, but it was a good commercial because it's talking about how strong the suitcase was. It got the name from Samson. That strength that he had. Everybody knew about Samson and how strong he was. He killed a lion with his bare hands. He killed 30 Philistines at one time. Another time, with the jawbone of a donkey, he killed 1,000 Philistines in one battle. Isn't that amazing? He performed many other miraculous feats of strength. Now, I want to ask you this. How do you think Samson looked physically? Think about it for a minute. You think he was a great, big, strong guy? I was at Game On yesterday, and I spoke for the ministry there at Easel Harding that Lucas was doing. And after that, they had a group that sang called Everlasting Soldiers. They were really good, and they wanted to get a picture made, and they wanted me to be in the picture. So I go back in to get in the picture there with the whole group, and they had a basketball player there that was 7 feet, 1 inch tall. They put me right in front of him in the picture. I didn't even cover up his T-shirt. He told everybody, I'm not really 7 feet, 1 inch tall. I'm 6 feet, 13 inches. Do you picture Samson great big like that? Maybe not just tall, but really, really muscular. I mean, he's cut, he's built, really big, strong guy. You picture Samson that way? I always had kind of pictured him that way until I went back and really studied and prepared this message. You know what? I don't think he looked like that at all. Because if you read the story, you know what puzzled everybody? How did Samson get to be so strong? I mean, if he looked like he would be that strong, would it be a puzzle to you? Would you be wondering where his strength came from if he was just great big muscular guy, looked like he was on steroids his whole life? No, you would say, I know why he's strong. Look at those muscles. That's why he's so strong. He probably didn't look like that at all. In fact, he told Delilah, remember, if you cut my hair, I'll be just like any other man. He probably just looked like an ordinary man. Physically, in his appearance, nothing stood out that would make you think he would be that strong. But when test of strength came, he showed his strength to be greater than any other man. That's the thing that amazed everybody. That's why they were so worried about figuring out how in the world does he get his strength? Where does it really come from? That's why they hired Delilah and paid her lots of money to try to figure out the secret of where Samson's strength really came from. So I want you to think differently about Samson. Don't think of him as this great big muscular guy. Think of him as an ordinary man that had extraordinary giftedness when it came to strength. But the second thing I want you to see about Samson is not only was he a gifted, privileged man, he was a fallen man. And he fell more than once. And we can see when you read through Judges and you read through the events of his life, there was one key element that caused him to fall every time. Something we struggle with today. Something that may be common to you or common to me from time to time, pride. Pride was the problem. I mean, when you're really gifted, it's easy to get puffed up, isn't it? To get proud of yourself. When you're really good at something, so good that you're better than everybody else doing it, it's easy to get puffed up and get prideful about who you are and how gifted you are and how talented you are, and you start thinking it's you. We see some examples of that in Scripture. Under number 2 is this. He was too proud to be satisfied with a Hebrew wife. Look in Judges 14, verses 1 and 2. Samson went down to Timnah and saw there a young Philistine woman. When he returned, he said to his father and mother, I've seen a Philistine woman in Timnah. Now go get her for me as my wife. Now in that culture, that's how it was done. The parents would go make the arrangements for the wedding to take place. So he says to his parents, that's the woman I want. But here's the problem. This is a woman from another race, another religion, another belief system. And God had told them clearly in the law and the teachings that he had given to them not to marry an unbeliever. We have that law today. We have that teaching today in the New Testament, not to be unequally yoked together with an unbeliever. You know how you can make sure that doesn't happen? You don't date unbelievers. Because in our culture, you end up marrying somebody that you were dating, right? That's what happens. I know people that say, but I'm doing evangelistic dating. Yeah, good luck with that. Because it's a whole lot easier for them to pull you down than it is for you to pull them up. It really is. They had been taught not to marry someone who didn't share his faith, and yet he goes immediately to this place. Now, Timnah was very close to where he lived, and where Samson lived was a military training area where their soldiers were supposed to be trained and prepared, and even under the rule of the Philistines, they tried to have them in training so they could use them for their purposes. So they were in this military base, so to speak, doing their training, and Timnah was one of those little towns off base. You know what it's like, those little towns off a military base? You go up to Clarksville, all around the military base there, there's some pretty rough little things around the military base, aren't there? Pretty rough places to go hang out. And there's a lot of stuff that's immoral around the military base. The soldiers want to get out and kind of do that stuff. And they want to make it available to them. And that's the way Timnah was. It was one of those places. And there's this woman there that gets Samson's eye. She's not a believer. She's not one of their people, but she gets his eye, and he's decided he wants her for his wife. So he decides that he's got to have her. Which leads us to the next thing is that he was too proud to listen to his parents too. Judges 14 and verse 3, it says, his father and mother replied, isn't there an acceptable woman among your others or among all the people, all of our people? Must you go to the uncircumcised Philistines to get a wife? In other words, the parents knew this was outside of God's will. The parents knew this was not going to lead to something good, that God was not going to bless this, and so they tried to convince him not to do this. But he says, no, I want you to go get her. to be my wife. It's amazing how we all tend to get to this age where we don't think our parents know anything. Sometimes we never outgrow that. But the usual flow goes like this. Ages 2 to 5, my dad knows everything. Ages 6 to 9, Dad knows most things. Ages 10 to 12, well, Dad knows some things. Ages 13 to 19, Dad doesn't know anything. Ages 20 to 29, well, yeah, Dad does know some things. 30 to 39, Dad knows most things. Ages 40 to 50, better check with Dad. Ages of 50 and up, you know, my dad used to say, isn't it amazing how much smarter they get when we get older? Yeah. There are a lot of times now I wish I could call my dad up and say, Dad, what about this? He's not around anymore. I miss that. Samson got to that place where he just didn't think his mom and dad had the right answers. Yeah, I know, you're just old fogies. You don't really know what it's like to be in love. You don't know what it's like to really want to have something and not be able to get it. You just don't understand. Haven't you had those discussions with your kids? Those of you that have raised kids through adulthood, you've been through that, haven't you? Some of you young people are at that stage now where you're having those discussions with your parents. He was too proud to listen to his parents. He was too proud to accept the consequences of his actions too. He went off after her to take her as his wife, but he messed everything up. The father ended up giving her to somebody else. He got so mad about it. He wouldn't accept the fact that it was his fault. He wouldn't accept the fact that he's the one that messed everything up. Instead, he went back and tried to get revenge on him. He used his strength to destroy people who had simply done what they thought was the right thing to do. And it was his fault that they did it, and he thought he was perfectly okay and right to go bring destruction to those people. The gift that God gave him, he was now using in ways totally outside of God's will. What about us? With the giftedness and the opportunities God has given us, are we using what God has given us the way God wants us to use it? Our time, our talents, our resources. Are we using them the way God wants them to be used? Or are we selfishly only thinking about what we want all the time? Getting what we want and getting mad if it doesn't go the way we want it to go. He didn't want to just make things right. He wanted to get even. He wanted to get revenge. That's what he wanted. And he was going to use his strength, his God-giftedness, to get revenge. And that led him to the next thing, and that is he was too proud to see the danger that was ahead. In Judges 16, if you skip ahead there to verse 4 and 5, it says, sometime later he fell in love with a woman in the valley of Sorek, whose name was Delilah. The rulers of the Philistines went to her and said, see, if you can lure him into showing you the secret of his strength and how we can overpower him so we may tie him up and subdue him. Each one of us will give you 1,100 shekels of silver. So I don't know how many leaders there were, but all of them said, we'll give you 1,100 shekels of silver if you can find out the secret. You know what? That means Samson was a huge threat to them, that they would pay that kind of money. Recruit somebody to work on the inside to find out. Now, isn't it amazing too, they knew how to get to Samson. How are they going to get to him? A woman. The wiles of a woman. Samson was proud and egotistical. Guess what? Women know how to play that. Women that want to play on that, women that want to use that against you, they know how to use that against you. They know how to butter you up and flatter you and make you feel so wonderful about yourself. And then they get out of you what they want out of you. And Delilah, it seems, was somebody they thought could do this with Samson, so they were willing to pay her to do it. Samson, for a while, it seems like he kind of knew what was going on because he played around with her. He told her, here's the way you get rid of my strength, and they tried that and it didn't work. He said, well, here's something else you could do to get rid of my strength. And they tried that and that didn't work, and the people that want to pay her are getting mad at her now because she keeps failing over and over again. Finally, she says, oh, Samson, why don't you just tell me the truth? You know, she pulls out the crocodile tear bit, you know. You don't really love me, or you tell me this secret that you've got. Right? And Samson just melts. He tells her, all you got to do is cut my hair and I won't be strong anymore. Poor thing, I'm so sorry I hurt you like that. So he gets him to go to sleep in her lap, and he calls for the guys, and they come in and shave his head. Samson woke up thinking he was just like he always was until they came in to subdue him, and he couldn't fight them off this time. his strength was gone. Which leads me to the third thing on your outline, and that's this. It took a lot, but finally Samson was a repentant man. He had rebelled over and over and over again, but this time it got to the point that Samson was finally humbled. It's strange, though, that it was only when he was blinded that he finally could see the mistakes that he had made. Look at Judges 16, beginning with verse 21. The Philistines seized him and gouged out his eyes and took him down to Gaza. Binding him with bronze shackles, they set him to grinding grain in the prison. But the hair on his head began to grow again after it had been shaved. Isn't it sad that he had to get to this place before he was ready to be humbled and surrender to God completely? God never wanted it to get to that. God was going to bless Samson. God was going to use Samson for great things. Samson brought this on Samson. When people are suffering, people are always blaming God. They're always mad at God for the suffering in the world. We bring it on ourselves. We rebel. We sin. We come short of what we ought to be. We, through our sins, bring suffering. Not only to us, but to the innocent people around us too. They suffer too because of our sins. Stop blaming God for what we keep doing to ourselves. Samson finally got to the place he was willing to stop blaming God. He knew he was blind and in prison, working as a slave because of what he did, because of the choices he made. He understood it now, finally. But this is later in his life. He's wasted so many years, so many opportunities, so much time. But now he's at a place where he's ready to recognize the source of his strength. It's sad that so many people have to hit rock bottom before they're willing to look up, isn't it? They got to be flat on their back before they'll look up to God, and that's where Samson is. But he finally recognizes the source of his strength. They've got him working at the prison. He's grinding out the grain there. He's probably pushing one of those wheels that's being turned that grinds out the grain. He's one of those, sometimes they used animals for it, but when they had slaves, they could use the slaves. And Samson's now a blind slave, and they're using him to turn that wheel and grind out the grain. And then they throw this party. See, the Philistines are celebrating the fact that they've conquered the great Samson. And they've got their own temple to their gods that they're celebrating in, and it's this great big building, and they got thousands of people there. And one of them says, you know what we ought to do? We ought to call Samson up here and make him entertain us. Samson went from being a giant hero to a clown that was going to put on a show for the people that he was now a slave to. They call Samson up from the prison. They got to lead him because he can't see. Remember, he's blind. His eyes have been gouged out, and he's chained, and they bring him up. He's got a servant there with him. We pick up here in Judges 16, beginning with verse 26. Samson said to the servant who held his hand, "Put me where I can feel the pillars that support the temple, so that I may lean against them." In other words, he's saying, I'm tired, I'm weary, I need to lean up against the post here that support the temple. You know, when you got a big building, you got to have support beams in it to hold up the roof and everything, just like we've got here in this auditorium. When you got a big open span like that, you got to have some supports in there to hold up the weight, and they've got that in the temple there. It says, verse 27, now the temple was crowded with men and women. All the rulers of the Philistines were there. On the roof were about 3,000 men and women watching Samson perform. They made him put on a little show for him. I don't know what they made him do. I don't have those details, but maybe they made him do a little song and dance routine. We don't know. He's there to entertain them, and they're laughing and making fun. Look at the great, strong Samson now. Look at where he's at now. Look at how we now rule over him and control him. He said he was so strong, and now look at him. They ridicule him. But then, in verse 28, Samson prayed to the Lord, and here's what he said. Sovereign Lord, remember me. And look at that next word, please. Probably the first time in a long time he had acknowledged that he had to ask God for his strength to please help him. Before this, he had depended on himself and his own strength and his own way of doing things. Finally, he's going to God with humility. He says, please, God, strengthen me just one more once more. Let me with one blow get revenge on the Philistines for my 2 eyes. Then Samson reached toward the 2 central pillars on which the temple stood, bracing himself against them, his right hand on the one, his left hand on the other. Samson said, let me die with the Philistines. And he pushed with all his might, and down came the temple on all the rulers and all the people in it. Thus he killed many more when he died than when he lived. He finally acknowledged that it was God who was his source of strength. But look at how late it was. Look at how many regrets he must have had as he asked God just one more time. Let me have the strength that you had given me my whole life. That I misused, that I abused, that I was so selfish with. Let me just do it one more time. Because I know you want to punish these Philistines, and you can use me to do it even if I have to die in the process. He's ready to give his life to the God who had given him all of that strength. But the sad thing is, see under this one, is Samson wasted so much of his life. He could have done so much more for God. Think of the regrets. Think about what could have been. Oh, I'm thankful he turned to God in the end. That's always good to see that somebody turned to God in the end. But what about all those years that could have been used to serve and honor God? All the good that could have been done with the time that was wasted. As our praise team gets ready, I want to ask you this. What about your life up to this point? To me, one of the worst songs that was ever made popular was the one that was a big hit for Frank Sinatra. It's called I Did It My Way. It sounds like such a good thing, doesn't it? Regrets, I've had a few, but then again, too few to mention. Get real. You've got regrets, don't you? I do too. And it's more than just too few to mention. I can look back over my life and the time of my life, and I could say I could have, I should have, I wish I had. There's a whole bunch of times I wish I had done it differently. How about you? Absolutely. I don't want another day to go by with the what ifs and I could have and I should have. I want to start redeeming the time that I've got. I want to use it the right way. I want to be wiser. I want to make better choices. I want to acknowledge God and come under Him more than I ever have before. More of Him and less of me every day, so that my life can really honor Him and be used the way He wants it to be used. I want that for you too. God wants that for you. He doesn't want you to waste another moment of your life. In Romans 2 and verse 4, we're reminded, or do you show contempt for the riches of His kindness, His forbearance, and His patience, not realizing that God's kindness is intended to lead you to repentance? The reason you're still alive today and have breath in your body is because of the kindness of God. The reason you've been born in this place in this time and have the opportunities you have is because of the kindness of God. Don't you realize that God's kindness is intended to bring you to repentance before Him, so that you can make life right before Him with the time that you've got. And you can redeem whatever time God allows you to have from this day forward to be used for His glory and His honor. Turn to Him now. Don't wait until it's too late to make up for the time. Don't wait until you missed all the opportunities for the blessings and the impact that God wanted you to have. Do it now. As we stand and sing, we invite you to come.